Assalamu alaikum, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the simple Obsidian setup. So this is again the second video. I'm probably not gonna be making a lot of videos about this, but just a quick demonstration of what this setup would do for you and what it will do. So first of all, what this setup intends to do is automate the way you make documents, the way you link documents. And what do you call it? Just track your habits as well and visualize that data, which is a new feature that has been added. So a quick demonstration of how it works. If I click on this button, it will give me a prompt. Basically, it will ask me what document do I want to make. There's a bunch of these options. These options are customizable. You can find them in a file called utility documentation inside the templates folder over here. Let's say I want to make a project and I want a program, and I want to give it a title. As you can notice, the prompts will tell you that these values will be stored in labels or in keys with a specific name. These keys can be really an emoji if you want, which for me they are easier to read and understand. That's why I use them. So we give it a title example. So sometimes I use books or refer to books in my projects. I don't have any, but I could put example. And I can give it a tag, an alias. Basically, an alias is to be able to link to it quickly without remembering the absolute path. We're not gonna use that. And tags, if you want to add tags. Then it will ask you for optional templates. These optional templates doesn't have to be just these two. You can add other optional templates, and they will be linked to by the Muhammad, by the document file. So you just click enter, and now you made the new document, the example document. You get a description file, which we chose, which we have to make any type of document. It is expected to have the description template, so this will be the main template that would be expected to exist. Otherwise, it will either try to look for another template, which probably is empty, or like it wouldn't create the project to begin with if the default the description template doesn't exist. More templates can be created manually, but I guess again, once you're done with manually creating these things, it's just automation from that point out. And I already have like ready scripts or ready commands, and you can copy and paste them if you want to get your work done quick. Templates do exist. You can just copy and paste them and modify them. Depends on what kind of things you're trying to do. You can add your own templates. That's totally fine. So one of the nice things you can do with this is that you can create subnotes. And once you click on the subnote button, it asks you what title. So another example. I probably typed that wrong, and it could be an Excalibur. In my case, sometimes I like to use something like a thumbnail or something. I probably won't in this video. Or you can put a topic, which is again like this is included by default, and it will create a subnote. The subnote will link back to the original file, and will also include a property. By default would be called parent, but in my setup it will be this back arrow, if you will, or this left arrow, with the absolute path to the main document, and it will have a specific in my setup it will have a specific metadata value label, basically, that has the title of the document that you created that subnote from. And a nice unintended effect of this setup is actually it will look better in a graph. So all these files, everything you create is linked to by something. So when I create a project, there is this file here, which is basically a Kanban file that includes links. Of course, these are all examples because this is not the first take. It will include links to basically, this is actually done, to the document that you made. And basically that will link all these documents of a specific category back to one place. And also, like, all the sub-documents will be linked back to the same, to the main document, and vice versa. You can, if you have, like, what do you call it? You can create a video that's only my own use, but I included it there. The command does exist if you want to look into it. If you want to create a sub-document of a specific category about a document of the current category, for example. But in mine, it doesn't really give you a bunch of options. It just basically makes a video about a specific document, usually projects. You can update the target. The target depends on the tracking template, which will include some basic data. So, like, write a little bit about the introduction. The more you move these values, like, in these lists, the higher the value will be, up until you move it to the done list, and the done list will have the highest value. And if all the cards are in the done list, then you have the complete value, which means your project is done. But you still have to click on update target. Sadly, I still have not figured out a way or a system to, like, automatically do that for me. I know you can use meta edit, but I'm not sure how that would work every time you create a file. But moving on, now the habit tracking. So the way the habit tracking is that you'd be expected to fill specific values, metadata, and these metadata would be read by some data view script. And that data view script will use a plugin called Obsidian charts, and it will basically display your habits in a graph like this. It can also display it in bars. I don't like bars, so I just keep it like this way. Now, setting this up in your custom way will take quite a bit of time, because sadly I still haven't figured out a good way of editing this once. You actually have to edit it 3 times. And the scripts you need to edit exist in a folder called custom.js. And custom.js will include 4 folders, one called defaults, which is basically default values to know how to display this. It's not really important to edit these values, but if you want, you can. However, keep in mind you need to understand how to edit it first of all, you need to understand JavaScript a little bit, and you need to look into the documentation of chart.js. But the main ones we need to look into is the daily charts, weekly charts, and monthly charts. And the reason you need to edit it is because the way you display these values and the way and the values you look for is all sit in here, as well as measuring it against a target, or also if you want to store it. Do you want to store it as an average value, or do you want to store it as a complete value, so like an additive value instead of an average, the sum of all values? And to explain this correctly, what this script would do by default is that it will add all the values of every habit, every type of data you track, and it will write it in here. Again, this will also expect that all the variables already exist but empty, at least exist somewhere in here in the metadata, in the YAML section. and it has to be here in the YAML section, or like, I mean, at least somewhere, just that this phrase exactly with that double, I don't know, double dot sign after it has to exist. The semicolon, sorry, I keep, what do you call it? I keep getting it wrong. The colon, not semicolon. And if that exists, it will edit it. If it doesn't exist in the file, I think it may result in somewhat unpredictable behavior, to be honest. I think it will keep trying to write into the file until it finally, like, just somehow magically creates that value. It will not. You will have to put it there to avoid, you know, writing in your file over and over again. So be careful. That's unpredictable behavior. But in this script, yeah, you will specify what variables you're looking for in these in the files you're looking into, and you will specify also that also by default means that you specify the values you're gonna write it in here. It also specifies the targets if you want to measure against a target. So instead of displaying the actual value, we can display a relative value. So, for example, I could say that I worked 75% amount of time to the ideal day that I, for example, would work. So, like, the ideal day, I would work on a project for 4 hours. Some days I may not work on a project at all. But so that you don't measure, for example, a small value like 1, 2, 3 against, you know, a higher value, a much higher value, which is like would be 50, sometimes 100, maybe 1,000. You would just measure it against the target, and that would give you just a percentage, and will be easier to display in those charts like here and understand them pretty well. So yeah. The reason this changed is because I clicked something. But you can have these values stacked, or you can have them displayed normally. Basically, when they are stacked, for example, the red line here, the 0 for the red line would be, for example, the wherever the wherever the orange line will end up at. So if the orange line ends up at 400 here, the 0 for the red line would be 400. But again, you don't have to have it. You can just uncheck this option here. But let's explain this section, and I think we'll wrap it after that. So what this script does, this section here for the most part is necessary. You cannot uninclude it except for this one. Yeah. That's an old script. This is not necessary. Set values, basically. If you don't want to write the values in the current file, you can just put that to false, and it will not try to write it into the current file. And that's it. The date is the period of time you're trying to read. So right now I'm trying to read daily charts, and I'm trying to render week, which basically means read this current week's value. So we will give it the current week, which in our case is the weekly node that we're in right now. And I think to get there is this one. So this weekly node. Now, because of the way we store weekly notes and daily notes, we store them in the format, in the date format of, you know, the day we're trying to write in, or the write for. I know I leave these notes empty. I'm kind of trying to build the habits of writing. I'm bad at it. try to forgive me on that one. What do you call it then? Then you put the format of the document. So let's say, for example, some people might put the number of the week before the year. Now, just to avoid the confusion, I just ask you to put that in the script. Of course, you don't have to edit it for each week note, you know, manually every time. You just have to edit it for the template. Then we put the date format for the notes we want to read, and for the weekly notes, we only read the daily notes of that week that belong to that week. And the way I store daily notes is by year, the number of the year, then the number of the month, then the number of the day. And this is basically just so I can understand what files I'm reading. If you see here, that's the format. The label format specifies of how I'm going to display the y-axis labels, like Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. If I want, I could display them as just number of days of the year, for example, or number of days. Well, I think of the month only. You can't really display days of the year. So this is like the days of the month. But I like them to be just the name of the day. To understand how this format work, you need to go and look into Moment.js documentation. They have a whole section just for how things are formatted. Once you specify the dates you want to look into, you have to specify a group. And a group basically here means either a directory, like so a specific file, specific folder, or you can, because of its data view, you can read tags. So any file with the tag diary, and I actually know it's a typo, but I've been using this tag for so long that changing it now is gonna be quite hard. I think I'm gonna have to write a script and back up my notes just in case I cause weird behavior. But to avoid that, I decided not to change that tag. So we're looking into all the files that contain that tag within the current week. So they have to be within the current week. And with this exact format. And we're gonna display those files' names in this format, in this date format, which is basically the name of the day. And we're gonna only display two types of charts here, or one chart and a table. And we have two values that these take. So the reason we have we have them as objects is that we're also expecting to have some information of how we are going to display like some properties in displaying these values. So if you want things to be stacked, you have to give it the true value here. You have to tell it that it has to be stacked. If you don't want it to be stacked, you can give it false, or you cannot include that variable at all. It will also have by default the value false because it's not there. And it will never stack the chart on top of each other. The target value will basically decide if you want to display that data measured against your target. So it will basically display the percentages of the values that you wanna measure. And so this can work also, by grouping weeks into months and grouping months into years. So we have here like one monthly note, and this is how we see we see like we have 4 weeks within that month that we measure. We measure all these, and we also write these values in the metadata of the month. Then we go to a yearly note, and these will be basically read from the weekly notes. Now by default, the default behavior of my script is that it will usually, when it writes things, it will usually write the total values, except for my weight. And the reason that it behaves this way is because I told it to do so. And you can do that, and this is also should be explained within the documentation. So to check the documentation, you go to templates, utility documentation. You can read all of that. It's quite a lengthy read, so this is for the commands you can build. So these commands are the commands that are responsible for basically the automation and the prompts that you see whenever I create a note or a new documentation. Then you can read the habit tracking documentation, which basically explains the script and how it works and all the things that you need to understand how this actually works, as along with some examples, but you actually have to view it in reading mode to understand those examples, because for some reason it will try to display it as is. So I can just put this here and this here, and it will actually show you how this is supposed to be displayed. But to be honest, it's not formatted in a really nice way, presentable way, so I just kept it as is. Another thing to note is that the way I documented all of this, I actually pushed it as is to GitHub, so it will not format itself correctly in GitHub. So yeah, you're gonna have to pay attention to that. But the way you can tell it not to to write value only as an average of the sum instead of the sum itself, you have to add a value called average. I believe it's somewhere here. Yeah, so you have to add average true to that specific value. Again, the drawback is that you actually have to write all this probably like 3 times for, your custom habit tracking thing to work. So yeah, that's about it. I'll see you in the next one.